take a breath together. So this month we are honoring the divine feminine. It's National Women's Month, and it just seems appropriate. It's also, our talk bank is partnering with the Science of Mind magazine. So the Science of Mind magazine this month is also about the divine feminine. So lots of great information and resources there. So how did God get to be masculine? Because for most of us, raised on planet Earth, particularly in America, we have been raised to understand and relate to as God as male. In fact, they've done sociological experiments where they just put folks in a room, give them a blank piece of paper and a pencil, and the only instruction is to draw God. And 80 to 90% of the room will draw a male figure in the clouds. So how in the world did we get there? Because the God I was raised with, quite literally, was an aggressive, not very nice, white male, old, with a scorebook and a baseball bat that occasionally went off his meds. And there was no way to appease this deity. That it declared its own creation flawed and then punished it for not measuring up. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that never made sense. Well, there's reasons why it happened. And this won't surprise many of you, that it's out of this idea of supremacy and dominance. Because if we go back to the ancient roots, the divine was quite feminine. The symbology of divinity was in fact the cup, which was symbolic of the womb. And the wine in the cup was symbolic of the womb blood that gave birth. Well, guys can't do that. Okay? The male can't do that. And so out of that came this whole idea of a savior that had to be wounded in order to fill that cup with its blood, thus birthed the idea of a savior, thus birthed the idea of a masculine God, and we began to use religion to control one another. Doesn't mean we have to stay there. Truth be told, creation is quite androgynous. It is neither male nor female. It's not about gender. That's that place where we recreate God in our image rather than understanding God creates all of us in its image. And so if we are created in its image and we are on the planet with masculine, feminine, and everything in between, I mean, we're experiencing now what we have always experienced. It's just now we're being a bit more open about it. That gender is an identity. Gender is an expression. It's not something that we're born with. Physiologically, we are born with reproductive organs that help us reproduce and maintain the society. But that's not about gender. That's about procreation. Gender is an identity. So can we let go of that enough to imagine a deity, a creator that is beyond gender, that encompasses masculine, feminine, non-binary, gender fluidity, and everything in between. Because that's the truth of what creation is. It's interesting, the place where we see gender as really non-binary is in a worm. A worm is both genders and neither gender. Doesn't need masculine or feminine to procreate. It simply regenerates itself. Right? And perhaps the magnificence of creation can be found in something that we tend to consider one of the least expressions of it. Isn't that interesting? In our teaching symbol, it contains the masculine and the feminine. The reference to wisdom throughout the ancient history has always been feminine. In most indigenous cultures, men are not allowed to create their own power shields. Women create them for them because there's this problem with testosterone that makes us confused about who we actually are. Okay? It's not a bad thing. The testosterone path is very linear for a reason, just as estrogen is very nonlinear for a reason. Now, that doesn't mean we don't both contain qualities of both, because we do. But our tendency is to dig our heels in and go, I'm not that. Well, we are. And truth be told, in the creative process, we're all pregnant all the time. Did you know that? That since you were birthed, you've been pregnant. Pregnant with possibility. And that we simultaneously give birth and are in a gestation process all the time. And what are we pregnant with? The mind of the infinite. Because every thought we have, every belief we have is creative. And so those times when we're uncomfortable, anyone who has ever been pregnant will tell you that's part of the process. Right? And so we're just diddy-bopping along, enjoying life, and then all of a sudden we're pregnant and we're about to deliver, and we don't know how to do that. And so, this idea of, and I was laughing with a friend in Denver who is studying to be a doula, a midwife, and how often we use the term in spirituality that we're midwifing something. And her experience of that is that we somehow think midwifing takes away all of the birthing things that aren't fun. It doesn't. Midwifing simply supports the one giving birth to embrace the pain of birth, to embrace the terror of birth. Biologically, now I don't know how they measure pain, but what I know is that biologically, scientifically, they can measure how much pain a human being can stand and not die from it. Childbirth exceeds that exponentially. Right? I mean, think about that. It is at least twice what the human body can actually stand and not die. And yet, it happens over and over and over. Sidebar, any of us that think men are the stronger sex have never witnessed childbirth. I'm not volunteering for that. Not gonna happen. And if we were telling the truth, if we slip back into the whole gender thing, if men gave birth, We wouldn't just celebrate birthdays. Every birthday would be a national holiday. I mean, let's tell the truth. Okay? So how do we embrace what we're birthing? How do we embrace the concept of a God that is every gender and simultaneously genderless? How do we get out of our human construct where either is supreme over the other, where it actually makes sense that we limit creation to male or female? Because there's so much more. We're really all on a spectrum, and so is Creator. If we look into nature, we see that. So I think part of how we get beyond it is we have to start with ourselves. You know, we have this creating a world that works for all as our organizational vision. If the world is not working for you, you cannot be a part of a world that works for all. So the first thing we have to do is create a world that works for me. Create a world that works for you. So in terms of the God of your understanding, and whether it's masculine or feminine or fluid, how do you begin to shift and examine what you were taught and what actually resonates with you? Because if calling God He doesn't resonate with you, I invite you to simply stop doing it. You don't have to. If it does resonate with you, great. There was a movie, and for the life of me, the scene in the movie, and I don't remember if the movie was called The Cabin or something that was part of the title, but God kept showing up in whatever form this guy needed God to show up as. And for the most part, it was a maternal figure. And the journey through this movie was he was backtracking where his daughter was abducted. And at one point in the movie, I was really struck because God showed up as the father. And he's like, I'm confused. You've been showing up as this role. And the explanation was very simply, today you need me to be a father. And so can we embrace a creator that will literally show up exactly as we need it in whatever moment we need it? That when we need a mother, it shows up as maternal. And then that takes most of us to a journey of navigating our earth experience with our own mothers. Because some of us would prefer, if God is going to show up as maternal, and I think about my journey with my own mother, no thank you. Anybody else have that experience? Please do not show up as my mother. Okay? And so we're invited to reframe maternal. And quite honestly, maternal is that place where creation simply gives of itself to its creation. Without restriction, without qualification. I've been remembering for the last couple of days the story in the Bible of Solomon's judgment when the two prostitutes came to Solomon and they had had 2 babies, and one of them had rolled over in the night and smothered their baby, woken up, found their baby dead, switched it with the other mother. And Solomon was charged with coming to terms with that. And Solomon's response was, cut the baby in half. and give half of the baby to each mother. And one of the women said, no, give the baby to her. And in that moment, Solomon knew who the real mother was and gave the baby to its rightful mother. That's the maternal that our divinity loves us with. That it lets go of its own investment in us and still gives to us. It's that part of creation that sustains us, that gives us its absolute power to create, that breathes us with its breath, that its heart beats our heart, that we have carte blanche. And really get this, we have full use of divinity's power to create without restriction, no matter how we use it. The divine feminine never pulls back, never condemns its own creation, never punishes its own creation. It simply gives itself to its creation. We understand that to be free will. And really, it's the divine energy that gives life to itself without hesitation, without qualification. What would it be like in your own individual life if you began to simply receive that level of love for yourself? To where nothing you have ever done disqualifies you from the love of what created you. That nothing you've ever thought makes you less than. That you are now just as precious to what created you as every element of creation has ever been. That you don't have to earn creation's love. And in fact, you can't. Because there's no way to earn what is freely given. How do you do that? If something is freely given, if you already have it, how do you possibly earn it? That's an internal mechanism that's operating that says, I don't deserve it. And to create a world that works for everyone, first you have to know that this whole idea of deserving is human created, and you can't deserve it, and you can't undeserve it. It's just creation loving itself as you. And that's pretty phenomenal when we step back and just let that permeate. Let that truth, let that feminine energy into every nook and cranny of your earth experience. You can't mess it up. You know, we have all these little phrases on the human plane, you know, only a face a mother could love. I wonder sometimes where those come from, and then I realize it doesn't matter, but in my imagination, I think it's our way of trying to understand and justify and embrace the truth of who we are. That no matter what we do, we live in a state of grace. We live in a state where we are loved no matter what. And that doesn't give us permission to go intentionally run amok, because that's a whole different conversation. But if you take anything away this morning, as we reimagine the holy, you are that in form. You are the divine feminine, birthing itself, pregnant with possibility in every moment of your being. That you didn't earn it. You can't unearn it. You cannot improve perfection. But what you can do is step fully into an experience of it. In human terms, we call that forgiveness. So anything that stops you from embracing all that you are, let that stuff go. It doesn't serve you. It's not true. It's not yours. You are the infinite in form. The perfection of the divine feminine is giving itself to you. Your only job, your only delight is to receive it. Let's take this into prayer. How good it is to know that I am in the company of the infinite. That this creation, creator, form is all one, expressing itself in multiplicity. That it is neither masculine nor feminine, and it is both. That it gives of itself without restriction, without qualification. That its heart's desire, that the joy of its own nature is to give to its creation. Knowing this to be true, knowing it creates out of itself, by itself, to be itself, I recognize that my life must be its life. That I have the privilege of living a life of the divine. And what is true of me is true of all. And so each embodiment within the sound of my voice is an embodiment of divinity, is an embodiment of that feminine nature that gives to itself. And so I speak my word, claiming and affirming that we open on this human level, in this human experience, to simply receive the magnitude of the power, of the love, of the breath, of the heartbeat that is given to us in every moment of our beingness. And then as we recognize and receive the divine's givingness of itself to us, that translates in our givingness to one another. So grateful to know this is how it works. So grateful to feel that excitement well up inside me as the divine recognizes the divine, loves its creation, gives to its creation, celebrates the removal of any block to its giving, and in so doing gives more. And so it's from this place of gratitude that I release my word, knowing it is the word of the infinite spoken as me, knowing that law has already acted upon it to make it so. I simply step out of this moment into the next to experience the fulfillment of its word spoken. And I invite you to join me in making this your own as we say together, and so it is.